This week's episode is brought to you by salt, a very important condiment for dishes all across history, and also for preserving food and stuff before refrigeration is a thing. Salt, sodium chloride, drips out of every pore of people who lose a chop challenge to Dimension Police, of all things. Salt, the rage that boils inside me, will come out, and you will be witness to it. Hey everybody, welcome to Nexus at Night. And if you're listening to this the day after the Democratic presidential debates, I can't believe that the Kool-Aid Man burst through the wall and won the thing right there. I'm Atlas.
I'm Matt.
I'm Root Beer.
And today we are talking about the premium metagame in Cardfight Vanguard, which is a game, apparently, that has a meta to it.
Yeah?
You
mean there are better decks to play than others? Weird.
What about personal preference, Matt? No one ever takes that into account. I can never keep that up for too long.
Also weird.
Yeah. The main thing I wanted to talk about was now that Premium Collection has been out for about a month and some change here in the West, and for a longer time in Japan, I wanted to see what the metagame has kind of fallen to since we've had the time for the decks to settle. But at the same time, I'm also super salty over my performance at the Los Angeles Shop Challenge for Premium format, so this is totally not motivated by that.
What happened at that?
Okay, so I don't have anything meta right now. I have, in Premium, I have Pale Moon, which, you can do early game stuff, I guess. Great Nature, which no, and Narukami, which is a pet project and is objectively terrible. So, I took Pale Moon with me because I thought it would be, have an easier time, I guess, or be able to pull out some wins through early game. And round one, I beat Bermuda Triangle. I was like, awesome, I'll be doing good.
All right.
Yeah, it started out fine. Second round, I went against OTT and lost, which I completely understood that. And then third round, I lost to Dimension Police Break Ride, which
whoa.
Yeah.
What year is this?
So the guy had Daikaiser old Daikaiser, the Break Ride, and then new Dayusha, and then he combined that with the new Laurel. So he had an 86k Dayusha
4 crit
with
guard break
with 3 crit and guard break. And I was like,
wait, should it be 4?
He had the inherent one from Dayusha, the Break Ride, and then Laurel. Oh, right, 4 crit. 3 extra crit, sorry.
Yeah. 3 extra crit.
3 extra crit. So I'm like, okay, well, from my experience of playing Matt during our time in college, you kind of just have to throw down the 1 PG and hope for the best, which I did. And then he got a grade 2.
I mean...
What?
Since he doesn't have the double guard break, 2 PGs is, not bad.
I didn't have 2 PGs. This was turn 3.
Well, get good and draw 2 PGs.
Exactly. So I threw down a PG, and he got a grade 3 and proceeded to kill me right there. So that put me at X2 and mathematically eliminated me from the top 8. Which got me thinking, what makes a healthy meta? The Dimension Police guy was XO going into round 4, which is funny.
What a godder.
I know,
what
right? That is a guy who sticks to his principles. Shout out to that guy. But but that doesn't necessarily mean that he did well, because he didn't get into the top 8. I guess he, because it was 2 separate blocks, so I think he
dropped
probably did.
The last 2 rounds.
Maybe. Who knows? But it seemed to me that I saw a lot of Neonectar, I saw a lot of Gold Paladin, I saw a lot of Bermuda Triangle, and those were what dominated most of the top 8 of that tournament. Half of the top 8 for the Los Angeles Downtown LA Shop Challenge was Neonectar. Which begs the question, what makes a healthy meta and what makes a diverse meta? And we're going to tackle that question today, and yes, there is a difference. This also comes on the heels of... Sorry, go ahead.
You go first.
Okay. I was going to say, this also comes on the heels of a pie chart that was released, I guess, from Bushiroad, but it showed a meta breakdown of, I want to say the top 8, I can't read Japanese, top 8s of major tournaments for both Standard and Premium. And the pie chart is as follows. So 15.8% of the tops were Gold Paladin, 15.8% were Bermuda, 13.2 is Shadow Paladin, 7.9 Nubatama, 5.3 Kagero, 5.3 OTT, 5.3 Aquaforce, 5.3 Neonectar, and 26.3 everything else. They just give you a gray blob, and they're like, man, whatever. Doesn't matter. So, does this look diverse to you guys?
I mean, like, yeah, kind of. Like, maybe the tier 1 decks, not as much, but we were discussing this kind of privately as we were planning the episode, and when we were hashing out all the math, we kind of figured something around 10 to 13% distribution on the tier 1 top decks was about right, and then everything else would kind of go on as follows. So, like, based on the math that we were doing, this does seem pretty diverse, right? You have 3, like, top tier decks that make up the majority of tops, and then you have a bunch of tier 2 decks that are kind of the lower end of representation, but still there, and then, like, only barely more than a quarter of the decks is the trash. Basically.
Trash.
That's a harsh way of putting it, but that's the first word that came to my mind.
Cries impalement.
Yeah. So, like, objectively speaking, then yeah, this does look pretty diverse. Like, obviously, if we were to take the same pie chart, there's also a breakdown for Standard, which is a lot more diverse. It has a much wider range of clans that are viable. Well,
yeah,
but,
the everything else portion of that is 10.4%, to put that in perspective.
Yeah, and even, like, the highest tier deck, which was Bermuda Triangle, was only 12.5% there, so, well, like, we had 5 clans in Standard that can be considered, like, top tier. So, like, OTT, is that Link Joker?
Yeah, it is.
I can't tell from just the symbol.
That kind of neutron symbol.
Link Joker. Yeah, I think that's Angel Feather.
It's it's OTT, Link Joker, Royals, Narukami, Bermuda.
Oh, Royals. Okay, Narukami and Bermuda. Yeah, so we have, like, 5 really strong top tier decks, and they kind of fall into, like, 10 to 13% range that we had figured out, and then going from about, like, 2 to 8% on all of the, like, rogue decks and tier 2 stuff, and then only 10% of that is, like, not worth talking about individually. So, like, just in terms of objective numbers, the meta is pretty diverse right now, and, like, going back to our overall topic of diversity versus, like, a healthy meta, then diversity is a more objective standard, I think, because we can look at pie charts and data like these and figure out objective numbers for how many decks are topping, how many different decks are there, how many different clans are there. And so once you put all the numbers out in just raw data like this, then you have an objective standard that you can reach for diversity. It's just how many different decks are viable right now, just based on the number of them topping.
Mm-hmm.
And then with a healthy meta, that's a lot more subjective now, because we're getting into things like how diverse are all these different clan strategies, how fun is it to play against. And it's like, do people feel oppressed by it, which will vary from person to person.
I have a rant boiling within me, the likes of which you've never seen, but I'm saving it for later in the episode. So, please, continue. As I try and control the raging beast within me, Hulk style.
Yeah, so, like, our little internal conversation, we kind of started getting onto, like, why the meta kind of feels bad right now, and we kind of came to the Yu-Gi-Oh problem, which is that, like, in Yu-Gi-Oh right now, there's kind of an order to things. Like, first, you kind of need your deck to be powerful, so you need some sort of strong win condition that can finish out the game. And then, once you have a powerful win condition, you have to be consistent, because having a win condition is nice and all, but if you need to burn through half your deck to get it, then what good is it? And then finally, it's just, once you're strong and consistent, it's just speed. How quickly can you put that win condition out? And so we're starting to feel like Vanguard is approaching the Yu-Gi-Oh problem, where at least in premium, with the new premium collections, so many things are not GB restricted, and then combined with all of the standard support, decks have very powerful win conditions that they can bring out very quickly now. And so we're seeing that the top decks are just who's the most consistent and fast, which is why Gold Paladin is kind of at the top there, is because they can stride on you very early on. They can do it really quickly, so
they can do it while,
it's just
while
hard
you're
to
on
beat
grade
them out.
1 now.
Yeah, so it's just really hard to beat them out because they're the fastest. Like, all of the win conditions are about on par in terms of power level now, at least for, like, the upper tier decks. So, because Gold Paladin gets theirs out the fastest, they're kind of the top. And then Bermuda Triangle, it's not as fast as Gold Paladin, but it's also very consistent. It has a lot of draw power, and like I said, like, all of the win conditions are kind of equal terms now. So it's just that consistency kind of lets it ride out and into its win condition.
It seems to me that... Oh, sorry, go ahead, Matt.
The biggest thing that I notice about a lot of the decks that are at the top is they have really strong early games.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Gold Paladin especially, I think, because of Gold Paladin's, like, pressure, you kind of have to be doing something.
Yeah.
Like, because Gold Paladin's just so insane.
The thing with Gold Paladin is that if you don't give them damage, they're still going to get a ride off on you, because almost everything, nothing really counterblasts except for the Spear X and Raven Hair Ezel. So you can damage deny them, but they're still going to get superior rides off on you. And now with Excel 2, the ride minus now becomes a plus, because you go, alright, ride Ezel from deck thanks to Kirf, that's a draw. Call Wonder Ezel, ride a new Ezel from deck, that's another draw. If you happen to be Richard, shout out to Richard, you draw Wonder Ezel off of that second Excel gift and call another Wonder Ezel, ride a third one from deck. You see what I'm getting at, where it's just everything meshes together, so like they made the synergy a little too synergistic.
Mm-hmm. Although, if I may ask, like, what's Shadow Paladin doing for its early game right now?
There's
I haven't
not
really
one.
been keeping up on...
The early game is... First Stride is so powerful that they don't care how... Like, yeah, I'm at 5 damage, I'm just going to go into New Morfessa and kill you, because Ritual 10 is laughably easy to get to now. Their early game is mostly just standard early games. So you have the Maka, Charon, Nemen, Swordbreaker stuff.
So
which
it's
is
really
good.
just... So it's really just that they can win by first stride.
And then Bermuda is, the new premium collection one that gets a crit for with everything in harmony, yada, yada, yada. And everything searches everything else. The key here is that you can win first stride. Like, you gotta win first stride or get super close to it.
Yep.
So that's the new metric. Instead of, early to mid-G era, it was all about, you get to second stride. Your first stride was either just triple drive or, like, get some resources or something. Your second stride was the killer. Now you have 4 turns to make something happen. Then you die.
Yeah.
The reason that Nubatama...
It's basically like Yu-Gi-Oh!
Pretty
Where
much.
you make an unbreakable board immediately.
Yeah, it's less about negation and more about, like, how much pressure you can put on the opponent. The reason Nubatama isn't as big as it is, and I can definitely offer this, is that their first stride is not very powerful unless they G-guarded. If they went first, you strode on them, and they G-guarded, then the Shiranui Rene turn is... that's a killer right there, is the plus 15k and a crit, 2 attacks at a time and then proceed to kill you thing. I think with Jamio Congo coming out in English, that's probably going to get even more crazy, and is probably going to do a lot. I'm not sure what the deal is with Kagero, what new stuff they got. Royals have all the blaster shit. Aquaforce, I think they just have a fast enough early game to keep up with golds. And then Neonectar... Jesus Christ, Neonectar. Okay. Neonectar is a clan that doesn't make so many attacks that it can be stopped by Hanali, and it doesn't... its attacks aren't small enough to where you can guard them. In Neonectar, once you're past turn 2, every every guard takes 2 cards or more, and that includes perfect guards, because you have the guard itself and then the card you're discarding. So basically, Neonectar's columns are so big that every attack is a battledore still, basically, without it actually being there. Because you go, all right, shit out, board of tokens, do Katarina. Shout out to Gabe, who, as cost for Katarina still, where you flip anything, the new strike, he just flips the most shiny, expensive-looking cards possible as a flex. Like, he literally never goes into anything else. Because you just go, all right, attack with, 40k columns, then attack with Katarina, shit out a new board. One of them is Gladiolus, the Ember clone. Attack with one side, then attack with Gladiolus, make a new thing, which makes a new column. Then your Vanguard, then the last thing. That's 6 attacks, and they're all usually over 40k or more. Most of them get up into the 70s or so, and that's crazy to me. Also, apparently the deck is rather cheap to build, so if anybody is listening to this rant, they're like, man, I would love to make Atlas sad. Go buy Neonectar shit. That's what you need to do.
You are so upsetty right now.
I mean, this entire idea for this episode just came from pure salt. Like, I could make beef jerky for like a week with the amount of salt that is pouring out of my body right now. It's not that I'm mad that like my decks, the stuff I run isn't meta. I'm mad that the line between the top tier decks and the road decks seems so gigantic. Because whoever designed sorry, go ahead.
I think a big part of that is like, since there's pressure to basically kill people on first stride, the real question is, does your deck have first stride kill potential? If it does, it's probably good. If it doesn't, it's probably bad. Like, the line between being able to kill first stride with a reasonable percentage of the time and not is really big. And basically, if you can't cross that threshold, your deck is going to be substantially worse than the other decks in the metagame.
You either have to keep up with Gold Paladin or survive Gold Paladin.
That's right.
Everything is measured by Gold Paladin now. I do think Gold Paladin is format warping. I think the deck is absolutely insane. What makes a format warping deck?
It really does sound like
the fact that every deck in the metagame has to revolve around this deck. Like, every time you play a deck in Premium, you're thinking about, how do I deal with Gold Paladin?
I mean, people are also thinking about Bermudas, too. Like, that's another thing that people think about. Maybe less so.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. But Gold Paladin is just so insane.
Yeah. Even before the Premium Collection, we remember that one tournament where the majority of tops was Gold Paladin, and then I think the top deck was Mega Colony because they spec'd themselves out specifically to deal with Gold Paladin.
And then it also dealt with the enigmatic loop, which was a thing at the time before they hit it with the ban list, because Mega Colony was made specifically to counter those two. And some people are saying, like, oh, Mega Colony is like an acceptable road deck. I don't see it on this fucking pie chart. And that's mostly because, you have a decent matchup against Golds and Neonectar because the new Gridora Strike can stop them from calling, but it's whatever. Like, it's too slow. Everything is too slow or not powerful enough. I was surprised to not see DIs on this list because they can have, numbers heading up into the 70s thanks to the new Gastile Stride, but whatever. I didn't make it for whatever reason.
But how do you live early?
I think that's the reason. You kind of just...
Like, Bermuda can plus for days.
Yeah, and then Shadow Paladin, like, even if they are throwing away a lot of cards to guard, that just kind of gets them to Ritual, and then being a Paladin deck, they can kind of build a board from very little, so that's kind of why they're able to survive, I assume.
I think that's the same deal with Royals, too. All 3 Paladins are represented on this list.
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no. Never mind. That's OTT. Sorry.
Yep.
Royals was the other
OTT one. Does have that position to gain advantage early, too. And so, like, I guess the difference comes in is, like, is your deck able to do these things? And that's why I think Gold Paladin is format warping, is because you're kind of, like, always thinking about Gold Paladin.
Well, yeah, it's either striding while you're on grade 2 because of Spear X, or having 17 cards in hand and hitting huge numbers, or having 5 attacks that are all 15k and a crit with Battledore Steel, or dominating your stuff with 15k and a crit twice, or making attacks that are literally unguardable except for G guards. Except, oh wait, no, you can't do that either because of Ichikushima. And just everything that is good in a comical fashion.
Yep.
I have a theory that whoever designed the cards for Premium Collection, half of them were designed by, I'm guessing, somebody who's been possessed by the spirit of Machiavelli himself, and the other half was Gary from HR. And the Machiavelli guy was like, alright, I have a stride that will help bridge the gap between Neonectar's token stuff and the Bloom stuff, where you get a bunch of tokens, and then you turn those tokens into real cards, but I'm not putting any limitation or cost on them, because fuck it. And then Gary from HR comes up, he's like, guys, I have a stride from Murakumo. If you can look at the top 7 cards of your deck and put 2 of them in your hand, if you have them on the field or in your drop zone. Huh? Aren't I awesome? And then
wow, same name stuff. It's so good.
Yeah, just...
I know, right?
Guys, I have an idea for a stride. It's a Pale Moon one where you can attack and then stride again, and then this turns into a rear guard, and then you can call over it. And then Gary comes in, and he's like, guys, I have an idea. It can copy the opponent's strides, but they're probably going to be going into the ones from Premium Collection. You know what? That's not a good idea. Oh, fuck it.
But here's the thing, right?
You know?
But here's the thing, right? Murakumo cards are just so bad in general that, like, they just can't live until first stride anymore.
They can't, no.
Like, they're gonna die by other shit. Like, they have no engines, they have no, like, they have a fucking loop, and they still can't get there because they have no way to survive to get there. That's why
I brought Pale Moon, because I thought, oh, I have a semi-loop with Alice and, Ginny, and then you combine that with Nightmare Doll Leslie to just pressure the opponent, which worked out the first game, and then the subsequent game against the Neonectar guy, he took 2 triggers on damage, and I was like, that's it, I'm dead, like, because I can't continue attacking, and then he proceeds to go into Katarina and just, like, smush my face in the dirt.
So, like, contrasting the situation we have now, what do you guys feel was a healthier time in Vanguard's meta?
I think the metagame right before the Bermuda set in back in G era was actually pretty good.
Really, even with
are we
like
talking
all the
like
even with all the Link Joker stuff, with like Rondo of Chaos and Salvation, and
oh no, well, like even the one like right before that, like
GBT
when you had
11 to
like
12?
Gears and or even, I mean, it could be a little after that, but even when you had like Gears, you had, what was it? Like, I don't remember what else was good at this point. But I remember there being like 5 or 6 decks that you could reasonably play.
Yeah, that was around 11 and 12, where like Blade Master was still good, DI was good, OTT came back from the dead, Gears was good. I think Night Rose was still viable. I can't remember,
Barely.
but I believe it was.
It was like DIs were good. Nubatama was decent to good.
Annoying,
yeah. Narukami had some tools, but I don't think it was super great, but it was alright.
Yeah.
But, like, I think just that era where I think the key there was a lot of the cards that came out, most of them had a GB effect, and then they also had a pre-GB effect. Mm-hmm. And that was a great way to balance it, because you had the stuff for the early game, which was whatever, it was fine. And then the GB effects were, like, pretty solid. And then that combined with a lot more strides that had to do with, like, resources. It was, like, giving a lot of clans more of a first stride instead of just, like, they've given a lot of decks like they're all right. This is your GB3 stride. This is the one that you try and kill it. Now it's the all right. Now bind a few. Bind 3, call 2, back, draw a card. Even though that's from GBT13, but whatever it stands for me. It's
yeah. But even like going into that with all of that stuff there, the meta still felt like pretty diverse. It wasn't until like around 14, I think, that things started crashing down. Like I think when we got Shiranui Rine is when.
But there were still like multiple decks. Like that deck was lame, but it wasn't like the only deck.
Mm-hmm.
You had 5 or 6.
I guess
decks.
that's the thing is like we didn't have to feel the need to like build around those specific decks.
Yeah, you just let Rene happen. You're like, well, this sucks.
Yeah. So a lot of this is just like right now, Gold Paladin is so like meta warping that decks have to respond to it.
But I think one important point of contrast for that metagame versus the one that they have now in Premium is that there were like slower decks that were playable. Like Kagura wasn't a fast deck. It just had like these big gut punching cards that eventually.
Like Ziegenberg.
And it had enough like Ziegenberg, like the Purge, all that nonsense, that eventually you're just punching your opponent in the gut repeatedly. But the problem in Premium is like you're never getting to that point where you can just start slamming haymakers because you have to kill them before then.
Yeah. So how does this come? Go on. Sorry.
So the idea is that we had some decks that were faster, and we had some decks that were slower, because the slower decks could still had tools to kind of like the faster decks weren't so fast that they just negated the defensive options the slower decks had. But in Premium, it almost seems like the aggressive decks are so fast that for a lot of decks they just outpace the defensive options you have available to you.
And then for the
so how does this compare to? Oh, sorry.
One more.
Go on, Atlas.
I was going to say for the decks that do quote wait longer. I'm just going to cite Bermuda and Neonectar in this particular case. The haymakers are so gigantic that the amount of cards you see in that early game, unless your name is Gold Paladin, is not enough to guard 5 40k attacks. Shields are only like, 15k? You only have 4 heals in the deck. You only have 4 PGs. Yeah, you have 10k grade 1s, but it's just not enough. The numbers are too big or too fast. Now I'm done.
Just play Bermuda.
God damn it.
Okay. So, like I was trying to ask, like, how do you guys think this compares to another bad meta, which was the time that Gears, Grand Blue, and Royal Paladin were the top 3, and it seemed like every topping list was just those 3 trading places?
Well, that's another first strike kind of problem, right?
Yeah.
Where we had just gotten G-Guards, but a lot of decks just didn't have good enough G-Guards to be able to deal with those first strides. And it wasn't until several sets later till people even got those defensive options.
Yeah, and like at the time it was like Time Leap made too much advantage first stride. Grand Blue, like depending on variant, Night Rose was kind of the same problem, or Seven Runner was just faster than everything, and then
or you just didn't even get to play the game, yeah.
Yeah, and then Blasters was kind of similar to Seven Runner, where they got going too early for you to get going with Stride. So, like...
See, but the thing with
I don't
Seven
think
Runner
we've ever...
and Ripples is that Bushiroad was shown that this deck needed to be... Those 2 decks needed to be dealt with because they won Worlds in an era where they were like, hey man, we want you to Stride, and everyone else was like, nope, fuck you. And it forced them to react, and in this particular case, yes, Gold Paladin is meta-warping, but it doesn't look like that. The pie chart seems just diverse enough where they're not going to be forced to act, I think. Aside from people just complaining, but everyone complains about everything. Anybody remember the fucking Gear Cancer memes? That went on for years even. I've heard people say, call Gear Chronicle Gear Cancer, and it's objectively terrible now. But, like, this pie chart looks good. It looks like a good... It's like the GDP looks good, but the people aren't happy. You know what I mean? And by that I mean,
I mean,
I'm particularly unhappy, and I therefore speak for everybody. Because I'm a talking head, and that's apparently how that works.
So, what did you? So, one contrast I can make to a different game is Magic's Modern right now. So, Magic: The Gathering format that just had a large Modern tournament that had featured most of the best players in the world. Where top 8 had 7 different decks of various strategies.
Okay.
And you might say, "Oh, is this meta good?" It looks like a healthy metagame if you just snapshot the top 8.
Mm-hmm.
However, this does not tell the whole story. There's a deck in Modern that is actively broken called Hogak. Hogak is... So in Magic, you normally have to pay mana for spells, right?
Right.
So you're
Yeah.
pretty much limited to cast spells by however much mana you have, usually. However, they printed this card that effectively costs 0 mana, is an 8/8 trample, and you can cast it from your graveyard.
That's a spell or a creature?
It's a creature. So
Okay.
they play a bunch of creatures that come into play for free, and they cast this giant 8/8 on turn 2. And a bunch of other nonsense. And if you don't have graveyard hate, you are just hopelessly far behind. So you might say, but there were 7 decks in the top 8. How good can this deck really be? Well, the thing that really tells the story through the weekend is, remember I mentioned graveyard hate's very good against this deck.
Yeah.
People were playing main deck, very silver bullet graveyard hate in the highest numbers ever seen. Out of, I think, 400 and some odd players, maybe a little bit more, there were over 800 copies of this card called Leyline of the Void, which says, and if a card we put into your opponent's graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead. It's Macrocosmos.
I remember
They were playing
Macrocosmos.
main deck 4 copies of Macrocosmos. And this deck still made top 8 and still overperformed. So you can say that the format looks healthy at a snapshot because there were 7 distinct decks in the top 8. But when you look at what cards people were playing, the entire format revolved around beating this deck, and it still overperformed.
So, like, Gold Paladin is our equivalent of this deck right now, where it is the top deck in the meta, but everyone also has to play around it.
But you also don't really have any... You don't have any silver bullets for golds. There's no, like... You know, there's no tripping mechanics. There's no, like, oh, you can't... Like, I play this equip card... Like, Vanguard doesn't have any spells, so it's just... The only thing you can really do against golds is play Hanali, which is objectively a good card to run because a lot of decks multi-attack. Makes sense. That said...
It's good at...
What?
It's specifically good in like decks like Bermuda too.
Yeah, anything that can call it mid-battle phase, especially, off of G-Guards, is super nice. But it's... You're running that for multi-attack decks, but that's not a specific... specifically for Gold Paladin, necessarily. There's not really anything you can do. For Gold Paladin, it's you have to hope you go first, and hope they just don't draw that many Wonder Ezzles. That's kind of all you can do. I'm not saying this turns into a dice roll format, but I'm saying that your chances of winning are significantly diminished. Gold Paladin players are running less copies of Grade 2, so that if they don't find Bowmane, which is their key to the superior riding of their Grade 3, they will G-assist for it just to get the superior ride. It's that good.
So, if we can pivot a little bit, like, how do you think about Standard right now? Because I know prior to this, people were kind of complaining that Standard felt a bit stale, but like right now, we can see, at least in Japan, things are really diverse. And like, do you think that this is also healthy, or do you think it's a very similar problem to Premium right now, where like even though Bermuda is only about 12% of the meta, that it's meta defining?
I think that's less true, but what is defining is decks that are newer rather than decks that were out before.
Why? Because
Like,
you have Link, Joker, and Narukami having new waves of stuff.
right, and like Murakumo was no longer playable because they haven't had support in forever.
Mhm.
And then like decks that just don't get support just aren't playable.
Mhm.
So like standard does have more I think different decks that are good,
Mhm.
but it is the problem being that I think the people's biggest gripe with standard is I think it's boring.
Makes
yeah.
sense. I mean, it's a slower pace of gameplay. That just comes down to personal preference, which is ironic because I just made fun of that at the beginning of the podcast. But it's, I think, to me, standard is fun in a different way in that you have to more think about what cards you have versus, like, more of the skill is done in the playing rather than the deck building, as opposed to premium where the deck building is the key. I do think that standard looks healthy right now, but I think a large part of that can be attributed to Gift 2s. Gift 2s breathed life into a lot of decks that were hurting. Any Excel deck that had just couldn't really like get the cards needed to prosecute. Now Excel 2 allows you to draw cards so that you can do that. And force decks where you have big numbers but not much to it. Now you have force 2. And protect, you have, I don't know, you can do protect 2 against stuff, I guess.
But why?
There's not really any reason to except for like versus Excel. That's kind of it.
Man, Force 2 is so funny. I want to Force 2 some nerd.
It's pretty fun to watch, honestly. I don't know. Standard seems fine to me. Versus, compare Excel 2 where like, ooh, you get a card, you can keep up your offense, versus Gold Paladin where it's, I'm going to get 4 of these in a turn and draw 4 cards.
Sounds good to me.
I mean, that might just sound like, ooh, premium's scary because you get to do more stuff, but just, that's not what I mean.
Yeah. So, I guess the last thing we can talk about is what would you do to fix the premium meta?
Ban the original Crimson Light Cub Kirf as starter. That would go a long way into, like... Gold Paladin wouldn't be killed not by a long shot. You still have the new Kirf, and you still have the ability of the new Ezel to, like, Soul Blast the Kirf and ride it. You still have Wonder Ezel to do all that crazy stuff. I don't know if Richard would agree with me, but I think that would go the longest way to helping the format at least be a little more diverse in that, like, you're not trying to keep up with that metric anymore. You can play slower strategies. Bermuda Triangle, I have no idea what you would do against that.
Yeah, I think you have to start with hitting Gold Paladin.
Yeah.
Like, once you hit Gold Paladin, you can then kind of, like, take a step back, see what falls out. But I think you have to start at Gold Paladin.
Okay. And then, this is just like a minor comment, but James, when we were talking about it, our friend James felt that because we're allowing all of the standard stuff into premium, that it just continues to speed up the early game as we get stronger and stronger standard support. So, like, what do you think about that in terms of premium?
Like, what's it gonna do? Or...
Yeah, like, what do you think about, like, that statement in general, and, like, if you think that that's actually bad for the meta, like, what would your solution be?
I don't think that the early game increasing pace is necessarily bad. The part that's bad about Gold Paladin is they're effectively cheating. Like, it's a deck that kind of breaks the rules, right? Like, they just start the game, like, they can start the game on grade 3 while you're in grade 1 and be starting when you're on grade 2. Like, this kind of breaks the rules, which is kind of what makes the deck really good. Like, if you're playing a fighting game, characters who break the rules are just generally really good. Because you're like, oh, that's fucking dumb. I'll use this character forever.
So this is the fair versus unfair thing, where unfair cards win games?
I mean, yeah, basically. Like, the card is just ridiculous. Like you play Gold Paladin to play these cards because they're absolutely fucking busted.
Mm-hmm.
And, like, I do think you have to start at Gold Paladin. Where you go from there, I don't know. Maybe you have to touch on OTT. Maybe you have to touch on Bermuda. I'm not sure. But I think OTT is kind of the next thing I'd look at.
I think OTT is... Like, the new Ichikushima stride drives me crazy because you switch between your G guards don't work and your PGs don't work, or no G guards, no zeros. Pick one, and they just switch between those two until you're dead. And it's not like I would ban one of the Ichikashimas or something, but maybe like limit Silent Tom. That's the best thing I can think of, or put him at 2. I don't really have a good answer to that otherwise.
Yeah, it's difficult.
Okay.
There's not like a clear answer, which is I think is also what makes it hard.
Mm-hmm.
I mean,
But I think you just have to start somewhere.
yes, for sure. I really think objectively they should hit the old Tirf. That should be the first thing to go, and then pick it up from there. It'd be interesting if instead of waiting, what is it they do? Like every 6 months they'll think about stuff, or they're like, we're doing a ban list inquiry, and they're like, nope, nothing changed. I'm like, why even tell us then? There's an episode in the archive somewhere, you can go listen to it if you want, where we just make fun of them.
That was pretty frustrating, especially when there were things that clearly needed to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
We're like, oh shit, they're finally going to do it. Nope, just kidding.
Yeah. I think they need to do a premium collection once a year, and I think they really need to take a look at what last year's was and plan accordingly. Get Gary from HR to design the OTT and the Gold Paladin and the Neonectar stuff next year, and get Machiavelli to design the Murakumo stuff. Just flip-flop it once every year. Yeah, Machiavelli and Gary from HR are their characters now. Whatever, it's a thing. Yeah, so that, I think, puts the question to you, the listener. What do you think they need to change, and do you think that this format is diverse or healthy, or neither? You can do that by going to the internets and tweeting at us. First, you guys. How do they find you?
You can find me at Wiggums 2Gs 2Zs on Twitter.
You can find me at Plasma Eclipse.
You can find me personally at Atlas Novak on Twitter or Instagram, and you can find this program on Twitter at Nexus at Night. You can also find us on Instagram, but we barely put anything up there. The last thing I put up was our friend Omar from college made his own custom force markers, which are admittedly pretty cool. I'd go check them out.
They look sweet.
I know, right? He was telling me how to do
Omar's
it.
a weird guy.
He is a weird guy. Shout out to Omar. All right. Well, until next time, I was Atlas.
I'm Matt.
I'm Root Beer.
And have a good night, everybody.